Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jason White. This is my channel, Weird Reads. You may have noticed I was absent for about 3 weeks. After I did my shout out video thanking everyone for everyone who helped me out with my channel and all my main favorite channels, I decided it was time to take a small break. And I'm glad I did. I sort of recharged the battery. And I didn't stop watching videos, though, you may have noticed, because I kept commenting. And also I found a whole bunch of new booktubers, which is, it seems like I'm always running into new people that were there the whole time and invisible to me for one reason or another. It's pretty crazy. So this is my November wrap-up video. There's a lot to catch up on, and so this might be a bit of a longer video, so I hope you bear with me. And if you like what you see here, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like. And comment. Always. I like comments. Everyone likes comments. And I am one of them. Alright, so it was a bit of a slow reading month for me. I did manage 4 books. And I was kind of lucky to get those. So I read Just Add Water by Hunter Shae. This book is, do you remember reading comics in the 80s, maybe the 90s? I don't know. Probably the 70s as well. They used to have these ads in the back for those underwater sea serpents. He basically based his story off that, where these 2 kids order their own sea serpent-like creatures, but what they get is something entirely different. It's a pretty creepy story. What I like is how good Hunter Shae is at creating suspense. So you have them growing the sea serpents, and they just sort of kind of forget about it, and things start happening while the kids are just living their daily life, like pets start to disappear and whatnot, and as a reader, you know that something's going on. It's something bad, and it's got to be connected to those sea serpents. And of course it is. No spoiler, because this reads a lot like a fun 80s horror movie. I highly recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars, so definitely check that out. I also read The Sorrows by Jonathan Janz. I got this book from NetGalley, thanks to the publisher for that, and to Jonathan Janz. This book was a lot of fun to read, especially once it got going. I wasn't a big fan of the beginning. I had a lot of trouble getting into it. And I think the reason for that is there was a lot of characters introduced at the beginning, and it was hard to define exactly who was the main character. Obviously it becomes to be Ben, and the story is about Ben, who goes to an island with a bunch of people in hopes to finish the score of a movie that's almost due. And Ben, he's the main composer, and he's going through what he typically goes through. Is like writer's block. He can't come up with anything. So they go to this island with this big castle-like house that's haunted, of course, with but it's not haunted in your typical way. I'm not going to spoil what it is, because well, you just look at the cover. That's a good indication as to what's there. This is a pretty fantastic book. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of other things going on too, like Ben's personal life with his ex-wife and his kid. That was hard to read for me, because I can't imagine being a father and going through that. So I gave it 4 stars as well. Definitely check it out. And it's Jonathan Janz's first published book. It's not his first written one, but his first published one. And it's a reissuing from Samhain Publishers, and now was it Spitfire? I can't remember, but the link, I'll put information down there. Okay, I also read Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. Now this is a fantasy story about a king is Actually, okay. First of all, you have two thieves, Royce and Hadrian. I'm just going to read the synopsis because that's probably better in my mumbling, jumbling nonsense. There's no ancient evil to defeat or orphan destined to greatness. And there's actually kind of a funny joke near the end of this book regarding the orphans. The orphan destined for greatness. And there's no ancient evil to defeat or orphan destined for greatness. Just unlikely heroes and classic adventure. Royce Melbourne, a skilled thief, and his mercenary partner, Hadrian Blackwater, are two enterprising rogues who end up running for their lives when they're framed for the murder of the king. Trapped in a conspiracy that goes beyond the overthrow of a tiny kingdom, their only hope is unraveling an ancient mystery before it's too late. Now, this book, they are hired to steal a sword in the king's castle, and while they're there, they come across the king's dead body, and of course they get caught, and they get blamed for the murder. And while they're in the dungeons awaiting execution, the princess comes down, and she frees them, and she lets them go with a job in mind, and the job is to kidnap the prince, who's now technically the king, and take him to where a wizard who's like 1,000 years old is being kept prisoner. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot. And it's a lot of fun. You know, a lot of people on BookTube are saying this is like light fantasy, and I would agree. It's light in the sense that it's not very dark. It's just basically a fun adventure story. There's a lot of politics in it. There's some political intrigue, but it's not too thick in that either. I really like the political systems that Sullivan created for this. And there's also some elves, and I don't know if there's orcs, but there's elves and wizards and all that. It's very tropey, but in the sense that this is all Sullivan's story. It's he made it his own. He made it his own, and from my understanding, the books they get better as they go. But I really enjoyed this one, and Theft of Swords is actually 2 books in one, because if you don't know, Michael Sullivan released these books independently. He self-published them, and so Orbit decided that because he had such success with this, Orbit picked it up and they published it, and because I guess fantasy readers like thick books, they grouped them together, so there were 6 books altogether, I believe, and then they condensed it into 3 books to make them chunkier. And so I read the first one, Theft of Swords, and it's a lot of fun. My star rating for it is, I believe, 4.5 stars. Just a lot of fun. Check it out. And I also listened to Tommyknockers, and I wanted to discuss that a little bit because, it's one of my favorite King stories. But reading it, or listening to it as I did this time, there was... If you go and read reviews or talk to people who are King fans, Tommyknockers really doesn't rate all that high with fans. And I couldn't understand why that was, but having read it again, I can see maybe where people don't like it. The story starts off with Bobby Anderson and Jim Gardner. They're the 2 main characters, and you follow them. Well, you follow each of them because they're separate, and then they get together. And it seems like it's their story and only their story. But once, to backtrack a little bit, the story starts with Bobby Anderson walking her dog through the woods, and she trips over a piece of metal. And that piece of metal turns out to be a spaceship probably, that's buried in the ground, and so she starts digging. And while she starts digging, weird things start happening. Like, she comes up with brilliant ideas on how to make her life easier so that she can keep digging. And turns out, and this is where the fault of the book, I think, lays, is you follow Bobby and Jim until they're together, and then suddenly you switch gears and go into a completely different story with the town, which is Haven, by the way. And so suddenly you're following the townspeople, and Jim Gardner and Bobby Anderson are pretty well forgotten for a big chunk of the book. And that's very deterring. And you know what? I really like the first half of Tommyknockers. It's fucking awesome. But the second half, it starts to lose momentum. King is very good at keeping to the plot and to the point, but I don't know if it was necessary for, the rest of the town. It's very Dickensian in scope, but I think you should have stuck possibly with just Jim and Bobby, or maybe had those other parts, those other characters within the town mingled in the beginning, so it wasn't such a jarring, what? We're not following Jim and Bobby anymore? So that's definitely one, I think, big flaw of the book, and that could be why it doesn't resonate with people quite as well. But overall, I really like the book. It used to be like a 4.5, 5-star for me. I bumped it down to 3.5 this time. I still love it, though, especially that beginning, man. I love following Jim Gardner on his drunken rampages. Don't talk to him about nuclear power, especially if you're for nuclear power. Alright, so I've been reading a lot of fantasy, well, not a lot, but I've been starting to read fantasy lately. One reason I think this is, I always, around this time of year, in the winter kind of hit early for us this year. I do have SAD, and this year it seems to be hitting me harder than usual, and I don't know why that is. For me, SAD is not necessarily feelings of sadness. It's more that I'm tired a lot more, and I feel unmotivated. I just, the things that I was very passionate about and wanting to do in the summertime and in the fall, just almost flatlined now. But it's something I gotta work through, and fantasy, for some reason, tends to help with this. And so I've been watching a lot of fantasy booktubers, and I came across this new subscription service. I found it thanks to a guy who runs a channel called Captured in Words. He had a video pretty much set up for that, and I decided to take the free month-long trial, and I love this service, man. Just to describe it quickly, it's like Netflix for both ebooks and audiobooks. Now they don't have quite the extensive catalog that Audible does, and of course Audible only has audiobooks, but they still have a hell of a lot to select from, and you basically can download almost, I don't know about downloading, but you can save and listen to or read as many books as they have, and I've been kind of obsessed with it for a little while. I think it's well worth your time checking out, and I put a link down there. I think it's an affiliate link because I got it from the share with your friends. I don't know if I get any perks from it, but they say that you'll get 2 free months. I only got 1. You can get 2 free months if you hit that link down there and sign up for it. Now, I first had suspicions that this might not be such a, I don't know, legit type of business, but I looked into it and it appears to be completely legit. Authors and publishers are working with Scribd to offer your work, and that's why not everything that you're going to look for is there, but like I said, you're going to find a lot of stuff. It's both ebooks and audiobooks. That's awesome. So definitely check that out. I was kind of busy with that, and I've already created a whole bunch of playlists, which is ridiculous, but I've got like over 60 fantasy books, over 60 horror books, In my horror list and science fiction and fantasy list, and I also have some like contemporary and nonfiction stuff. It's quite the service, man. I'm serious. Keep saying it. It's quite the service, but it is quite the service. All right. So I did get a few books in November as well. We're transitioning into the hull now, and I was watching Carla's Book Bits, and she reviewed this book, and I have a history with the author, J.R. Hamantaschen, and more frequent in Goodreads. I was actually a moderator for the horror group, Horror Aficionados, and he reached out to me offering to send me his first collection of short stories, You Shall Never Know Security. And I read it and I reviewed it, and it was a great book. I loved it. And so he reached out to me for his second collection, which is this pretty cool cover. And cool back, too. And this book is called With a Voice That Is Often Still Confused, But Is Becoming Ever Louder and Clearer. Quite the long name. And this one, unfortunately, I didn't get to review. He sent this book to me during that period of time where I was kind of going through like a 3-year reading slump, and so I haven't gotten to it yet. So I'm going to read it and review it too. And as I was saying, I was watching Carla's video, and I commented on it saying, I forget what I said, but JR noticed that, and he contacted me through Goodreads saying, hey, if you're interested, I'll send you the third one too, and that's this one here. And this is called A Deep Horror That Was Very Nearly Awe. And so I'm going to read this and review it too. I like J.R. Hamantaschen's style. He's very much like a weird fiction writer, and his stories can be quite dark and weird, at least from his first collection, so I'm looking forward to that. I also got from Crystal Lake, I bought these. I bought this one because, and I want to read it. I still haven't read it. It's god awful of me. But it has a lot of great authors in it. I've talked about this book a few times, and I've been meaning to read it a lot. And I'm going to read it in the new year. It's got stories by Jonathan Janz, John Skip, Brian Smith, Rachel Autumn Deering, Glenn Rolfe, Matt Hayward, Kelly Owen, Max Booth III, Jeff Strand, Robert Ford, Brian Keene, Adam Caesar, and Mary Sangiovanni. It's you can't lose with this book. It's going to be awesome. And I also got Fantastic Tales of Terror from Crystal Lake Publishing, because this book looks fucking awesome. And I'm looking forward to reading this. I tend to read a lot of short stories in the winter too, so this will come in great during January and February. This has stories by Jonathan Mayberry, David Wellington, Bentley Little, Mort Castle, Kevin J. Anderson, Mercedes Yardley, Tim Wagoner. The introduction is written by Tony Todd, the actor, Candyman. There's also stories by John Palisano, Lisa Morton, Richard Chismar, Christopher Golden, Bev Vincent. And it's important to oh yeah, there's Joar Lansdale in here too. Bubba Hotep is in this by Joar Lansdale, and that was one reason to get this, because I want to read that. I haven't read that by Joar Lansdale, but I've always wanted to, and it's collected within here. It looks like a really fantastic anthology. There's some artwork. That is awesome. So I'm looking forward to reading that. And also, I got myself a rare limited edition chapbook, and this came in, and it's signed and numbered, and it's The Buroker of Nightmares by John Padgett. The back says, "A dream for a drug." John Padgett did the Secrets to Ventriloquism, which I raved about in my earlier videos. And I recommend that, and I'm looking forward to reading this. I want to show you the... there's artwork inside of this as well. That's not it. But as I said, it's numbered. I got number 87 and signed. So that's really cool. I was glad to get that. Alright, we're getting there. I also got some ebooks. Now, for my Kindle, I got Becoming by Rolfe. I hope that's how you pronounce his last name. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. And that was it for Kindle. For iBooks, I got Mage's Blood by David Hare. This book has been compared a lot to George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, so I love that series. I gobbled that crap up before the HBO show came around, so I can't wait to dig into that. I got the Emperor's Edge box set, which is books 1 to 3 for that series, by Lindsay Buroker. Now, I'm not sure, but I believe this is her... I believe that this series is Lindsay Buroker's steampunk books, the series that she wrote within that subgenre. And I haven't really read any steampunk, so I'm looking forward to that. I really like her science fiction books. I haven't read any of Lindsay's fantasy yet, but I think this is a good place to start. I also got King of Ashes by Raymond E. Feist. This is the author that got me into reading fantasy. I remember I was like 20 years old, maybe 19, and I was at a friend's house who did read fantasy, and I was like, you know what, I've always wanted to read fantasy, I just don't know where to start. And so he handed me Magician's Apprentice by Raymond Feist, and I gobbled that series up. I loved it, and I've been reading fantasy ever since. Not regularly, but a lot. Alright, and one more book that I got. Actually, that's not the last. In the Woods by Tana. This book I got, I think it was recommended to me from BookBub. I'm not entirely certain on that, but I know I got it for like really cheap. Anyways, there's one more physical book. This is technically moving into what I'm going to read in February or December, although it's not set in stone because, as I mentioned, I'm very much a mood reader. But I mentioned earlier about booktubers who are new to me. I found a whole bunch of them who are seemingly invisible to me in the past, and suddenly I'm watching their videos and being like, oh my god, these guys are great. Anyways, Jes Reads Books. She has a Goodreads group that she hosts with, or moderates with one of her friends, and they read Stephen King books. That's what the group is. They read Stephen King books. And for December and January, they're going to be reading this, 11/22/63. This is one Stephen King book I haven't read. I'm dreadfully behind on all his newer stuff. And but I've been wanting to read this one because I keep hearing how good it is. It's like 800 pages long, I think. Yeah. So once I saw that video about that read-along, or the group read, I snatched that up because I was like, man, I've been wanting to read that book forever. So I'm going to read that through December and January. I'm going to take my time. So also, as I mentioned, I'm reading right now Rise of Empires by Michael J. Sullivan, which is volume 2 of the Rhaeria Revelation series. And alright, I think that's it. Like I said, a little bit of a lengthy video. Thanks to everyone who stuck around this far. And that's it for now. So we will see you again very shortly in the next video. So keep being creative, and we'll see you next time.